Hi guys, so today we will be discussing the next section of ecology. So here we will be discussing 4 very important terms of ecology. Let's start with the first very easy to understand term, which is environment. So environment means the immediate surroundings, the abiotic factors surrounding the organism at any given time. So for example, environment around me right now is hot, it's humid, right? There is a lot of sunlight, there is not enough water in the air. So all of that would be the environment that surrounds an organism. The environment that surrounds an organism, especially during its developmental phases, can have a huge impact on its development as well as on its well-being, that is continuity of life, right? Moving on, we have something called the habitat. So habitat, we would call it the address. Where does an organism prefer to live? So all the environmental factors in any given locality will decide what kind of organisms will choose to live there. So for example, a human will always choose to live on land. A fish will always live in water, right? So that's its habitat. Habitat is the broad category of environmental factors in which an organism best succeeds in survival, right? Now, there is a concept of a microhabitat. So, for example, let's talk about a forest, or let's talk about terrestrial basic forest type ecosystem. In a forest ecosystem, you will have tall plants, right? You will have herbs and you will have grass, right? So all of them now have a microhabitat separation, right? So some of them will prefer to stay on the bottom in the ground, some will prefer to live at a certain height, some will grow up to a higher level. Inside a pond, like in composite culture of fish, you have bottom feeders and you have top feeders. So some of the fish prefer to feed from the top, some of the fish prefer to feed from the bottom. Why? Because the kind of prey that they want are found in those specific regions. Then, even though it is the same habitat, the pond, these two kinds of fishes, they have their individual microhabitats, right? So smaller region inside a habitat is a microhabitat. Now, moving on to a more difficult thing to understand, which is the ecological niche. The ecological niche now, Dr. Odom said that if habitat is the address, then niche is the profession. So it's the role an individual plays. So a good way to understand is that all of you guys appearing for boards this year or next year, you're all students. So that is the common address that where you are at. You're all students, but individually, some of you will be preparing for NDA, some of you will be preparing for JEE, some for CET, some for NEET, some will be taking up art, some will be taking up commerce. So then this becomes the niche in which you are working, correct? So niche can be decided by multiple factors, like in your case, your aptitude, your ability to study, what you want to become in life decided your niche. For animals as well, the kind of predators they have, the kind of prey they want, what kind of environmental factors they want, all of these will decide the niche of an individual. A very good way to understand the difference between the niche and the habitat is to take examples. So I've written down a few examples. So for example, the Arctic fox and the African hyena, both scavengers. So they play the same role in the ecosystem, in their respective ecosystem, right? So their role is the same. But one lives in an Arctic region, so in frigid zone, the other lives in the African temperate, tropical region. So widely different habitat. Similarly, think of a tadpole and a frog, right? Again, different feeding habits and different habitats as well. Birds in the same nest. This is a very interesting concept. There is a species called the Plochia species. There are two birds that live in the same nest. So their habitat, even their microhabitat is same. But again, one of them feed on insects, the other feed on leaves. So again, their role gets diversified. Another example is the water bug and the water boatman. They both live in freshwater systems and in the shallow waters. So microhabitat is also similar. But water bug is a predator, water boatman is a scavenger. And again, the roles are diversified. So just because two organisms live in the same habitat does not necessarily mean they have the same niche and vice versa. Okay. Now, this concept, right? So this niche is same, but the habitats are different. It's known as an ecological equivalent. So Arctic fox and African hyenas are ecological equivalents. Why? Because वो अपने ecosystem में उनका role same है ना? So what I'm trying to say is that all of you trying to become doctors by sitting for NEET in India versus all of those students in America trying to pursue their whatever their degree for being a doctor is. So all of you preparing for MBBS, you have the same niche even though you live in different regions. So then that becomes an ecological equivalent. So I hope this much was clear. If you have any doubts, because you get a lot of questions based on differences between niche and habitat, and complicated questions in NEET as well. So if you have any doubts, you can drop your doubts in the comments and I'll try to address them. Coming to Gauss's exclusion principle, Gauss's competitive exclusion principle states that if two individuals with a similar niche, right, are in one ecosystem, then it is impossible for them to coexist. Okay, an experiment was done in which P. aurelia and P. caudatum were taken. The bacteria were taken. They were individually grown in two cultures. And it was seen that they both grow beautifully. Both P. aurelia and P. caudatum. But the moment they were grown together in the same culture, P. aurelia grew better than P. caudatum. So, if two organisms with the same niche are grown together, even in a lab setup, where there is no resource control, even then, it's impossible for them to grow. One will outcompete the other. The other option that there is, if not to outcompete, is to separate the niches. Then, naturally, in the course of time, species A and species B will end up separating such that the niches don't overlap anymore. So this is known as Gauss's competitive exclusion principle, which is based on the theory of competition between organisms living within the same niche. I hope these concepts were clear to you. We will move on to population ecology from the next lecture. Thank you.